Did you ever see any inside hardware in this machine? The nuts and bolts, wires, and obviously you probably did. Did it look like our nuts and bolts and wires we get in a hardware store, or what?
Well, as far as fastening devices, everything was formed together. There were no nuts and bolts. Wires, there were no connecting wires even between electrical systems.
So what was the course of energy? How did it go from one area to another area?
The best guess is essentially it operated like a Tesla coil does. It's, a transmitter and essentially a receiver tuned to the transmitting frequency and receives the electrical power. And there again, that's not real advanced technology. Tesla did that in the 30s, I think.
Lights on a console with a plastic?
No, no lights. There were no lights.
Was the craft monolithic in construction then?
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
Was the craft monolithic in construction?
Yes.
Could you recount for us in detail your memory of what happened the night that you and the group of people were discovered on the perimeter of the viewing area when you saw the craft?
I bet John Lair tell the difference.
No, it just it was compelling, and I just would be curious to hear your point. In particular, there was one aspect of the story. He said, evidently, when they were the vehicles with some 10 unmarked Broncos were.
How many?
He said 5 on each side of the road. 10.
Must have been a different time. No.
He said you either jumped from the car or left the occupants of the car to go out into the desert so that you wouldn't be discovered amongst the people there, and that you returned to the
That's true. Yeah. Okay. What really happened?
Tell us all.
We drove out. Well, I mean, John Lear's a nice guy, and I like him, but he does have a tendency to add about 15% color to stories, and if a story goes through them twice, it's 30%. But what happened that night is we took a Jean, my wife at the time, and her sister were going to go out and see what we could see because it was a test flight coming up. And John knew that we were up to something because we didn't invite him in, and he showed up at the house and said, okay, well, we're going, and come on. We had rented a car because the only reason we rented a car was because sister-in-law was in from out of town. All I've ever owned usually is sports cars. They seat 2 people, and that's all we had. So we had rented a car, and we all piled into that. And we drove out there. I don't remember what time we got there at, but it got dark. We waited right till dusk to drive up the road. And we got probably about 7 miles in, I think. And we were very careful not to hit the brakes because we didn't want the lights going on, because we knew by watching up on the road beforehand, we knew there were security guys running around just looking.
Is the mailbox road?
No, I've never been on Mailbox Road. That's the only Broom Road, that big one that goes up there. Well, it's probably on Mailbox Road, but I didn't watch anything from that. We drove in probably about 5 to 7 miles, and we brought all kinds of stuff with us. We brought Geiger counters, we brought a Celestron 10-inch telescope. I brought a 9mm pistol because I really didn't want to get caught. And we came up there, and as we stopped the car, my sister-in-law was driving. She stepped on the brakes. And so we stopped right there and just waited. We didn't see any reaction. And then somebody opened the door and the dome light went on. And as soon as that happened, 2 different sets of headlights lit up on either side of us. And we said, that's it, we're dead. So I went in the truck and I got my pistol and I went out to the desert.
They were far enough away.
Oh no, what happened? No, I got that wrong. We hopped in the car and then started really hauling ass back to the exit. Thinking if we get to the road in time, we're out of their jurisdiction, there's no problem. Yeah. So we got about halfway up there, and I think there were 3 vehicles maximum. I stopped, and we figured we're not getting out of there because as we're getting close to the top of the road, you can see another vehicle pull in. I said, well, we're trapped. So I got off and ran out to the desert. Now the rest of the story is from the people that were there because I was out in the desert laying down on the ground. Supposedly what happened was these guys came out. John set up the telescope real fast. And that was the best excuse he could come up with. And the guys came over and said, I think John interrupted him and say, hey, what are you guys trying to do, a drug deal or something? Did we interrupt something? And they kind of just shrugged that off. And John said, well, we're looking at Jupiter. And they said, what are you guys doing out here? They just ignored whatever he had to say and went on for a while. I don't remember the conversation because I wasn't there. But now it was pitch black. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was a moonless night. And they said, all right, we'll just get the hell out of here. They backed off down the road and they stopped. But we didn't know that and turned around.
You can see all this happening, right?
No, my head was down. I didn't want my glasses or my white face shining. So,
a few hundred yards away.
A few hundred yards away, they had stopped. No one knew this at the time. And I came back, out of the desert, and I'm usually very sarcastic and joke around. And what I said was, when Gene Huff was standing there, I said, man, we're lucky those guys didn't see the other 50 Delta Force we had out there, or something along those lines. They could have taken him out at any time. And he laughed. It was just, I don't remember the exact content of the joke, but those guys heard that. And they're sitting there watching us, so I guess, now I learned about most of this from the debriefing afterwards when they took me in. So the guys that were there were on top of the truck or Jeep they had, and they went to arms because they thought there were guys standing out there. So they had us all under gunpoint. We didn't know what was going on. And we're sitting there talking about everything that had happened, flying saucers and all that stuff, sitting on the bumper, and we're just looking off down the road. And we see a little green light drop on the ground and roll around, and it was a night vision scope. And so it picks it up and it disappears, and we all said, well, let's get the hell out of here.
What's that? What happened?
So one of the guards had dropped a night vision scope, and it rolled on the ground, and we could see the little green image rolling around, and you see it pick up and disappear. And it was only like from here to the the netting over there. That was the distance because it was completely dark.
Wow.
And so we got scared, and as soon as we got in the car, we all agreed, they're right there, and they heard everything. So we took off, and we got to the top of the road, and the Lincoln County Sheriff was there. And that was another major hassle. So he wanted to search the car. We wouldn't let him, and he was in radio contact with the base or these guys out there, and they said, where did the extra guy come from? And that completely confused him because they had never seen me come up or something like that. They thought I was another guy that walked around, however. Anyway, the big problem was that there was another guy, and I think legally they can only hold you there for an hour, and we were there for like 59 minutes, and he said, okay, go, but he really wanted to search. Well, I got to backtrack a bit. John Lair made the colossal mistake. We were under just minimal suspicion at the time, and he asked for everyone's ID. And in the trunk, we had everything, the Geiger counters and all that stuff. And, the people that didn't want to show their ID said, well, we don't have it, we left it at home. And the other ones that did, took it out. And John said, wait, mine's in the trunk. And he opens the trunk, and there's all the stuff laying there. And that's when the cop decided to keep us for a long time. And we've always hassled John about that forever. And he said, so you guys are out here with a Geiger counter, a telescope, and all this other hardware, sound equipment, and video stuff, and you're just out walking around? And we all said, yeah. And so that's when he kept us. And that's really what happened that day. And the following day was a work day for me, but I was taken into debriefing and yelled at for a long time.
Never allowed to return to the S4 after that time.
Right. Well, that was kind of a turning point.
Were you fired then? Were you officially fired?
No, I was never fired. See, at the time, they were going to pull my clearance before that. So I don't know if that was ever clear. The main reason was for me not progressing any further there was they halted my clearance because at the time my phone was being tapped, and I allowed that. I signed the order to do that. And I'm going through my background, and at the time I didn't tell my wife what was going on until later, and as things progressed. But she was having an affair with somebody on the phone line, and it was her flight instructor that I was paying for flying lessons. But as this was going on, just like in the astronaut program, not only do you have to have security as far as no connection to foreign governments or things like that, but as far as your family life, it has to be stable because they don't want any loose cannons running around. So this was going on. I had no knowledge of it, and they said, well, we're going to what they were going to do is not say anything to me and wait until one way or another the situation resolved itself. Either, you know, my wife took off, or you know, came to an end, or whatever. So when I was in debriefing essentially that day, you know, this is when they really started attacking me and hassling me, and that's when they took out the phone transcripts and, you know, hey, by the way, Bob, your wife's fucking somebody, and that was the last time I went back. So that was a real fun time.
Another profound meeting.
Yeah.
In a variety of ways.
So that was,
Must have been just pretty bowled over.
yeah.
Did you see stuff out at S4 that you've chosen not to talk about?
Did I see stuff at
Yeah,
S4?
is there more going on that basically you've decided not to?
Yeah, but not that really changes anything. It's the same thing. It's just little technical things that, you know, it's really not worth bringing up.
Yeah, real quick, did you see the paperwork on how they got the discs to start with?
No,
Just were there.
it's pure speculation.
What did you have the Geiger counters for, and do you believe that, are there dangerous levels of radiation in this area because of testing they did previous to now, previous to this point?
I think we wanted to see the background level, and I don't remember. It was just like a staple to take along with it, you know. Just
I
burning
understand that
iron.
this area tests high for radioactivity, the background levels are high in this area. Is that true, that you know?
I don't know. We had the Geiger counter, but before I got to measure the background, I don't know what it was.
Bob, this might be important because Jacques Vallée is such stature, and he's trying to debunk you on the basis of your, supposedly he's telling your report is only that you saw a DVM and an oscilloscope at S4.
As far as the equipment there?
Yeah.
This is another thing that's gotten so twisted. Jacques Vallée, who's a UFO writer of some sort, came to see me in Las Vegas. I don't remember how long ago it was, but after the George Knapp thing, and he came down with some producers from Universal Studios who was going to make a movie about his book Intruders, or not Intruders, that's someone else, Dimensions or something. Anyway, they came down with him and they said, well, we want to know what you think of this, and you know, just give us your opinion if this jives. And I looked at the information and he explained it to me, and I said that has nothing to do with the craft that I worked on or any of the technology that I was involved in, you know, period. And Jacques really didn't appreciate that, but they asked for my opinion. So I said, and you know, as far as the conclusions he's drawn, I don't agree with them. I think they're completely wrong, and so on and so forth. So he really didn't like me after that point. So he began to interview me, and he said, well, what did you do here and here? And I went over things, and there's one, and this is on tape. I don't see why he would even make a fuss about it, but he said, well, what kind of equipment did you have to work with? And I said, a wide variety of, you know, of different things. And he said, well, what about your bench? What was on your bench? I said, anything you'd find in a normal tech bench. I said, oscilloscopes, DVMs, things like that. And he said, okay. And then, you know, later I heard through the grapevine that, you know, he's out doing a lecture. And Bob Lazar said he's back engineered the flying saucers with an oscilloscope and a DVM. And, you know, and this is on, it was on tape. And I think a lot of that's, he's really pretty pissed at me for shooting down the movie, but I had no idea that was going to be the effect, or else I would have reserved my opinion, you know. But you know, it's just the way it goes.
What was the physical layout of the compound where you worked at like? Could you describe it?
It was long. It was about up the side, on the side of the mountain range there. Where all the hangar doors went alongside, and then there's a long corridor that goes down in back of the hangars. Off that corridor comes several rooms, only 2 or 3 of which I've been in, the medical area, the lab that I work in, and then there's a small little room where I read some briefings and things along those lines. But I haven't been in any of the other rooms or know if there are things behind it or underneath it. So that's all I can help you with on that.
Last night, John Lear said that you really didn't believe that there was anything unusual going on in those space shuttle shots. You thought it was ice particles, you know, these ones they've been claiming are
STS-48.
Oh, yeah.
Could you
That's
give
not
us-
ice, it's dust.
Or dust, whatever.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that, you know, that's,
Have you seen the Hoagland
Yeah.
analysis?
yeah, I've seen the whole thing. I've seen a copy from NASA, and it's, you know, unfortunately, it would be neat if there were flying saucers, but if you see a bright white flash first, that's the positioning thruster firing on the
But the
left side of
attitude
the
of
shuttle.
the shuttle didn't change when it...
No, it doesn't. It normally doesn't do that. You know, those are station-keeping thrusters, and that it all depends. If the thruster is firing in the direction of the shuttle, keeping its forward momentum, there'll be no attitude change. That's only if you're firing a pitch rocket will you see a change like that. And the fact that it flew forward means it was firing in the direction of the shuttle. So those little dots and things you see, I mean, I firmly believe, because I've seen other things along those lines, are right on the lens. They're not on the horizon. That's why you see a flash, there's a delay, and then particles that are normally floating in space, you see dart off like that because of the delay time from that. And, you know, until I see something else that leads me to believe that, I know it looked neat, you know, like there was a flash, something came up from the ground, but if you just watch that and think that these are right against the lens, and that right flash is one of the linear thrusters firing, that, you know, you'll probably have a different opinion of it.
But what about the right angle move? It's a 45-degree turn, which means it has to stop.
Right, you're talking about little dust particles that are moving, and then when the thruster fired, you know, it doesn't, there's no mass to them in the reverse
There
direction.
are other particles in the video that do the exact same thing. They're all
Yeah, if you look at the whole video and not just the crop down, there's all kinds of junk floating around, and when that thruster fires, there's about a 1 second delay and everything goes flying off exactly like you'd expect.
Everything goes flying off and drifting except for one item that accelerates at like 10 times the speed of all the other items in the video.
Yeah, but there's
Have you seen Hoagland's detailed breakdown?
yeah.
Okay, what about when he's talking about the light coming over the horizon of the planet, under the layer, I forget what he calls the layer, and over the ionosphere, but over the horizon?
Yeah, but that doesn't, it still doesn't make sense. It doesn't take into account that something is right on the camera lens.
Did the tape that you listened to, did it have the last transmission from Mission Control? Did they have the
I really don't remember. No, I'm not standing on this like this is absolute fact, but from what I've seen.
Most of the tapes have had that edited off. The last thing said, heads up, rat jump, which means pay attention and keep your mouth shut.
I don't know. I mean, that's my opinion, and I haven't seen anything to veer me from it. But you know, I always remain open-minded. But I don't know. That's all I can say.
You mentioned the photon earlier. Do you think physics is taking a wrong turn by looking for exchange particles? When you're talking about the strong force or gravity there? I'm not clear on why you're skeptical about the gravity.
About the graviton?
Yeah, and every other force seems to have an exchange particle connected with it.
No, not necessarily. I mean, they make it have one, but you know, as time goes on, that really hasn't held true. And you know, the bottom line is they don't. Well, first of all, they don't even believe there's a graviton anymore, so I'm not the only one. As far as exchange particles, you know, still, though some of them, like the zeta particle, maybe that's an actual thing. But you know, when they're looking at transfers of energy, I think these are scapegoats, you know, for the most part. And you know, a lot of the experiments that I was doing in Los Alamos essentially was along these same lines. But you know, other exchange particles like the intermediate vector boson, you know, I don't believe that thing exists. I really don't. I think they're grabbing at straws and just coming up with excuses.
Did you use or see any kind of drawing, mechanical drawing or electrical schematics? Or
Oh, sure.
Any kind of documentation,
Yeah.
special which we don't know?
Of what we knew of the amplifier and engineering layouts and things along those lines, and I've duplicated those at home.
Between saucer travel characteristics and Earth's gravity well and the zero gravity.
Is there a difference in?
I mean, the ability for long distance travel, how is it affected by zero gravity?
Well, zero gravity is ideally what it wants. I don't think it wants in any other interactive gravity field. So
It would be much harder to control though with zero gravity.
no, not really.
But as far as you know, there's never been any tests.
No tests out of the atmosphere, you know, as of 1989 when I left.
Since it is controlling gravity, would it be possible that these things could either make themselves entirely invisible or a field of invisibility by bending the light around the outside of the ship?
Yeah, that's a byproduct of what's going on, because, just as any large source of gravity bends light, and you get an intense focus source like that, and it's going to really distort it.
Do I understand correctly that you just said that you duplicated the gravity amplifiers?
Some of the equipment and most of the drawings, yeah.
And when you say duplicated, you mean you tested it to see if it works?
No, not tested it because I don't have the facilities to do that. But like I mentioned to someone else earlier, that this summer I'll be patenting those drawings and that device itself. So should anyone decide that all of a sudden they discovered it, and since they've made no claim to it, I'll have the patent.
Wait a minute, you don't know about this? Come on. That's really part of the Federation, the intergalactic patent treaty. Don't you know about that?
No, I didn't sign that, so it doesn't
That's
count.
right. I'll try some ice water.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you're talking about gravity amplifiers. How do you build a gravity wave detector? Let's say you can determine the frequency and the source direction of a gravity wave emanating from the planet or other source.
Well, actually, a gravity wave detector is a tough thing to make, and they are being made, and I don't exactly follow what they're doing, but I know the basis of what it is. It's a giant drum. It's 20 or 30 feet long, and it's filled with dry cleaning fluid with carbon tetrachloride in there, and it rotates. And I never paid much attention to it. I have no idea how that detects a gravity wave, but I think Caltech has even funded one of them.
Well, I mean the gravity waves that you're talking about.
Well, gravity waves are gravity waves.
What about the small gravity wave, gravity A? How do you detect that? What is the frequency of that?
The frequency that the actual reactor operates at is like 7.46 hertz. It's a very low frequency.
And that's the frequency of Earth's gravity or universally all gravity?
That's the frequency that the reactor operates at.
Did you use any computer process in the control process? Or?
In the control process? No, I wasn't affiliated with that.
Why would you suppose that the government would continue to spend these massive billions of dollars on space projects that are extended, 20 years into the future, when it knows it has this technology that would make them all obsolete tomorrow?
Repeat the question.
Oh, he wants to know why the government would continue to spend millions and billions, I guess, of dollars on space projects when they have this technology. And well, first of all, you're assuming that the whole one of the government knows what's going on, and that's probably not the case. NASA probably isn't aware of what's going on here. Second of all, just because they have this stuff, they haven't left the Earth with it, and they won't. So we still want to send things up in orbit, and that's the most efficient way we have of doing it, is essentially building a big firework to go up there.
But if they spent the same money in developing this technology, or half of it, they'd probably be able to...
Not necessarily. Sometimes all the money in the world doesn't get you anywhere. Though it helps. And of course, if you want to keep something secret, that's out of the question. But putting that aside, just dumping billions and billions of dollars into it, sure, you're going to make big strides and you get real reasonable people to work on the thing, but you're still going to get stuck around the area of where you don't have the proper materials or the techniques required to manufacture these things, and that's where you'll get stuck.
If your patents or when your patents get approved, what do you plan on doing at that point?
Nothing. Just
Nothing?
paying the yearly fee to them and leave them alone.
Can you comment on your debriefing a little further? What happened?
They really didn't go into much. It was, they wanted to know what we were doing out there, and they went into, well, we reviewed this was secret. When we said it was secret, we didn't mean bring your friends here and, things along those lines. They flown in. And it was my impression that they didn't know what was behind the mountain. what we were watching. They were just told to guard what was going on. At a point of bringing up the flying saucers and things of that sort, and that's when they threatened me. That's when they mentioned the thing about my wife, and they were really pissed about that. And then they